Yay.
Go ahead.
Okay. Welcome to part two of the 2000 Thomas Jefferson Memorial Foundation's report on the 1998 DNA study. In part one, I, Dave Dietrich, and Dr. Holochek critically assessed the methods of the Thomas Jefferson Memorial Foundation, the committee, subcommittees, working hypotheses, and so forth. We today conclude our examination of their report by a detailed look at their results. Did they examine all the relevant evidence, or was there cherry picking? Did they logically weigh the evidence or weigh it in proportion to biased assumptions smuggled into their study? I'm Donna Vitek, and this is The Real Thomas Jefferson, episode 12. Before we begin, though, I ask two things. First, if you enjoy the show and are informed by today's discussion, please like the video and share it with others. Second, please
You enjoy the
contact.
fireworks and behind me at the Acropolis, by the way,
Right.
bringing in the new year.
Second, please contact us through the comments section under the video if you have suggestions for future episodes.
Okay,
So,
today we are lucky enough to have Dr. White McKenzie Wallenborn, or Dr. Ken, as I like to call him. Dr. Ken was a member of the 2000 committee. He had a unique perspective on the goings-on in the research committee, and we're going to have him come on after about the 10-minute mark of the show, maybe even before that, and talk to us about his experiences and why he was the sole dissenting voice. Now, Dr. Ken is a sort of hero of mine. He's a paladin for Thomas Jefferson, and I have a deep, I wanted to introduce him because I deeply respect the man, and he is a man who conducts himself and has always conducted himself with the greatest integrity and probity. Hence my reason for inviting him on the show today. So Donna, why don't you begin?
okay. Um, okay, I'm going to begin by asking Dr. Ken to tell us something about himself, his tenure in the medical school at the University of Virginia, his interest in Thomas Jefferson, and why he was chosen for the 2000 committee to evaluate the DNA evidence and the collateral historical evidence concerning Thomas Jefferson's possible paternity of some or all of Sally Hemings's children.
So Dr. Ken, you want to talk about, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you were chosen for the committee?
Who's that? Me?
Yeah, you're up.
Oh, no. Okay. Well, yes, I grew up in Charlottesville. I was very close to the members of the people who were working in Monticello. And my teacher in the fifth grade had written 5 books for children about Thomas Jefferson in Monticello. So I had a good founding on that. When I came back to Charlottesville after touring in the Air Force, I was doing a lot of research at the University of Virginia Hospital. Now, none of that research had anything to do with Thomas Jefferson at the time, but I had to follow the rules of research and what you can do and cannot do. When I retired, I came up to Monticello to be a guide because I really loved history and I really loved Thomas Jefferson. I thought he was an unusual person and brilliant. So at any rate, I was there for 5 years as a guide, and they asked me to come on because of my training in research and so forth. They asked me to come on the search committee, or the committee that was going to determine whether Thomas Jefferson fathered any children by Sally Hemings. So I took it. I was very happy to take it and everything, but from the start, the committee was very biased. I couldn't believe how much bias they had.
Okay, well, we're gonna get to that, Dr. Ken, in a little bit. I just want to ask you before we go on for the first question, how many years were you at the medical school at University of Virginia?
35 years.
35 years. So here we have a young man of 94 who has devoted a life to the practice of medicine. And I add, he was preeminently suited to be a member of the committee with his experience in medicine. So Donna, why don't you begin with the first question? Or Dave, you got the first question. And
yeah, I got the first one. Hi, Dr. Ken. How are you, sir? I'm going to start with the first question. Let's begin with the iteration of what we concluded of the methods in part one. Did we have any concerns, methodological or logical, or any others?
well, from part one, we really didn't have too many concerns. I mean, one of my concerns was, why was Diane Swan Wright chosen to be head of the committee? What were her unique qualifications? And from my perspective, I don't know that she was uniquely qualified to head a committee. There was additional problem with only one sample from the Eston Hemmings male line. And the DNA experts chosen on one of the subcommittees at Monticello insisted that we would have been better served by having more than one sample, because with one sample, if you mislabel a test tube or some such thing, the results can get conflated. So for the most part, we really don't have too many concerns with the methodology. I think some of the subcommittees were ill-formed. Dr. Ken will later on give us his perspective about some of the biases of members of the committee. But in terms of the methodology, it seems to me it wasn't too bad. Donna? Can't hear you, Donna.
Oh,
No, we're Donna Vitek.
Okay, question number 2. Let's now turn to the discussion of the results. What were the findings of the committee?
Well, I'm just going to read from what they've written without critical analysis. I'm going to talk about 4 points. And then after I introduce these points, we'll get back to Dr. Ken. So the Heritage Thomas Jefferson Memorial Foundation writes, based on the examination of currently available primary and secondary documentary evidence, the oral histories of descendants of Monticello's African-American community. Now, why were the oral histories relevant in terms of evidence? I don't know. Recent scientific studies and the guidance, in other words, the DNA, and the guidance of individual members of Monticello's advisory committee for the Robert H. Smith's International Center Studies and advisory committee on African-American interpretation. They came up with the following results. 1, Dr. Foster's DNA study was conducted in a manner that meets the standards of the scientific community, and its scientific results are valid. Okay, we talked about that. That's not a huge problem with us, other than the fact that should have been more samples from Eston's line to make sure there's no problem. 2, the DNA study combined with multiple strands of currently available documentary and statistical evidence. Dr. Ken will talk about Neiman's Monte Carlo study, indicates a high probability that Thomas Jefferson fathered Eston Hemmings, and that he most likely was father of all 6 of Sally Hemings' children appearing in Jefferson's records. Those children are Harriet, who died in infancy, Beverly, an unnamed daughter who died in infancy, another Harriet, Madison, and Eston. Okay, so we have this, what I call the consilience argument, that the DNA evidence points to Jefferson as the father of Eston, and in their estimation indicates a high probability. How that is in conjunction with the historical evidence that Jefferson fathered all of the children. I call that the consilience argument. We've seen that the DNA evidence does not single out Thomas Jefferson and does not afford a high assessment of high probability that Jefferson fathered Eston Hemmings. We'll talk, if we talked of it last time, the historical evidence is very, very fragmentary, and there's not much of it. So this is a really bad argument. 3, many aspects of this likely relationship between Sally Hemings and Thomas Jefferson are and may remain unclear, such as the nature of the relationship, the existence and longevity of Sally Hemings' first child, and the identity of Thomas C. Woodson. And last, the implications of the relationship between Sally Hemings and Thomas Jefferson should be explored and used to enrich the understanding and interpretation of Jefferson and the entire Monticello community. Now, I'm going to add something that I said before last week. They come up with their conclusions in 2000, and in talking about exploring the relationship of Jefferson Hemings, and in 1999, Onuf is co-editor of a book titled Sally Hemings and Thomas Jefferson: History, Memory, and Civic Culture. He is already inculpated of paternity by this book being published prior to a verdict. Okay, I find that unbelievable. I find that astonishing. All right, David, now we're going to bring in Dr. Ken, and Dave and Donna bring us home here. Let's talk to Dr. Ken and get his expertise.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Ken, do you have comments in your essay, Monticello Guide's Insider View, on the findings? You did not agree with the conclusions and pushed to give voice to the contradictory conclusion. Can you explain, please?
Well, first of all, it was very highly biased committee. And the problem is, if they said the wrong thing, they may lose their job. But that was only part of it. You talk about this, the DNA study was not the way it should be. He did not have a witness to his drawing of the blood. We don't know whether he changed things when he went to England to take the sample. We don't know at all what went on when he was out drawing blood. I know him quite well. He's a nice person.
Eugene Foster.
Yeah, Foster he's a nice person, but I think that he told somebody, why was he doing this? It's because I want to get famous. Now, he did get famous. Now, when the DNA came and they tried to put it together, then the part that one part that they brought, the one test that they brought, and said, I've got him. Now brought the papers up. Well, his scientific paper was rattled with errors.
That's Fraser Neiman, right?
What's that?
Fraser Neiman?
Fraser Neiman. That's right. And so at any rate, that was another thing. And also, when you start pointing to dates of gestation and so forth, any of you are married and worried about children, that is a very, very unusual date to try to really be exact on. So that part was not very good. So I wrote all this down and presented it to the black woman who was head chairman.
Diane Swan Wright?
What?
Diane Swan Wright, right?
Yes, that's right. Diane Swan Wright. And she never shared that information on paper with the rest of the committee. And they went 9 months after they had finished this before they released it. And interestingly, they released it on almost on the date of Martin Luther King's history, the day they celebrated his life. And so, they were secret. That wasn't right. And they said, and the findings was that the evidence indicated that that Thomas Jefferson probably fathered one child, and maybe all of Sally Hemings' children. Well, that was so much. Well, I had another word to say, but not very true.
A massive overstatement, really, based on the paucity of evidence that we had.
So anyway, Dan Jordan asked me not to present my paper when they had the big newspaper opening and given their finding. He asked me not to give my paper there, and I said, "Well, okay, I wasn't planning on anyway." But my paper was finally given to a couple members of the board at Monticello. Finally, they were given to several of the members on the committee, and it was.
So you, Dr. Ken, you presented the only what's called today the minority report, and you challenged many of the conclusions that the other members of the committee drew. And from what I gathered from reading your minority report, and Dave and Donna can chime in, you thought it was a bit of a witch hunt.
Yes.
That the conclusion was formed prior to study of the evidence.
No, let me tell you, people don't really recognize what happened about 3 or 4 years later. Dan Jordan changed the statement about this. He says the facts for this situation are not definitive. Now, what does that mean? They can't be proven. And that was he was real honest. I think he finally realized what I was trying to say, and that was his way of getting it. But it changed their original statement where they thought that he surely fathered one and maybe all of her children. Now,
but the damage was done by then, wasn't it? Just like the people who published in Nature, Dr. Ken, they retracted. Yeah.
Like been on alone, Merrill, and all of them backed me up, and it was.
Now, Duma Malone was the first Thomas Jefferson Research Scholar at UVA. Merrill D. Peterson was the second, and both of these were extraordinary Thomas Jefferson scholars, both friends of Dr. Ken.
Yeah, when Merrill would come up there and bring guests, he'd ask for me to do the tour, which was sort of unusual, but I was delighted. And Dumont Malone was a family friend, but he was a patient of mine. He used to come see me, and I'd take care of what he had for 15 minutes, and in 20 minutes we'd talk about Jefferson. But I had to read all 6 of his volumes when I became a guide, so I was familiar with his approach to things, but he didn't touch much on Sally Hemings. But it was just and the most recent person heading the Monticello thing was encouraging. She was determined to destroy every good thing about Thomas Jefferson. And they finally, they say she resigned. They fired her. That's what they said. But anyway,
whom are you talking? Is that Diane Swan Wright who chaired you, about whom you're talking?
No, that's Green.
Oh, Leslie Green Bowman. Yeah. She was president of Thomas Jefferson Foundation. She recently resigned. And of course, Annette Gordon Reed recently resigned from the foundation board. David, do you have any?
Me or even claim to be able to argue with me about that. And she just was determined to destroy Thomas Jefferson. The history of Thomas Jefferson.
Well, Dr. Ken, I have made the claim that with the ascendancy of Peter Onuf as the Thomas Jefferson Foundation Scholar at UVA, that's when things started going downhill for Jefferson. I have made a very strong claim that Peter Onuf was probably the most important negative influence on the legacy of Thomas Jefferson with his book, Jeffersonian Legacies, the conference in 1992 that he held, the book that he published in 1990. Have you had any experiences with Peter Onuf?
Peter Onuf was a horse's rear. He was really bad. He would come to class in his running clothes, and the chairman of the board of visitors went to one of his classes, and the chairman asked several questions from him, and he said, "Oh, I'll have to come back to that. I'll meet you right after the meeting." Well, he ran out of the meeting, ran with his papers, and that's Peter Onuf for you. He was, oh God, how bad a person can you get? I just don't understand why Virginia kept him there. He was.
You say in your paper that when you're talking about giving evidence, you say something that Peter came and said, "We're historians. We don't have to give facts or have evidence." Could you say something?
That's right. He certainly he did say that, and that's the people who were running the university's version of Jefferson after Merrill Peterson had retired, and God, they.
What did Peterson think of Peter Onuf?
And the woman they had up here, I don't know how the board could handle that either. Well, anyway.
Dave, you have anything?
But
Dave, do you have a question?
Oh, no, I mean, this is fascinating. Wow. From an outsider's point of view, it's just amazing how the limits of knowledge and uncertainty did not seem to be factors of consideration in the original analysis. I'm not talking about, with Dr. Ken or any other folks that looked at it objectively, but wow, I mean, this whole issue is just full of uncertainty and limits of knowledge, but yet we've come to this definitive conclusion that has now lasted for several decades, and there's no evidence to support it.
Yeah. Well, Thomas Jefferson hated slavery, and you cannot see a number of his quotes. He found one person, Banneker, was a black person free who was brilliant, who sent him several solutions to various
almanacs, right?
And also sent him, oh goodness,
an almanac. He sent him an almanac.
Yep. I'm so happy to see people of your faith, your color, are able to do the things that you're doing. And he then got him a job with the layout of Washington, D.C., because he was a good mathematician. So anyway, how in the world can people live with honest unbelievably bad.
Well, I met you, Dr. Ken.
Can't yell as loud as I used to.
That's all right. I met you, I think, around 2012 or 2013 after publication of my book, Framing a Legend, and I gave a talk, and you said many very kind things about the book, and I was very deeply honored to have someone whom I so highly esteem speak so highly of the book. So I want to thank you for that.
I must say, you really know how to write, you know how to get it there, you know how to, I don't know how you get all those publications out that you get, but they're all good. And I read as many as I can. So, and I thank you. I'm sorry I didn't come around with the Zoom, but that's not unusual. All the times I try to Zoom here on other things, it's difficult for me to put my computer and get in front of it.
Well, Donna had to walk me through it for about a half hour, how to use my cell phone just so we can get you on the phone. So don't feel so bad. Donna, do you have anything you want to ask Dr. Ken about Thomas Jefferson and his research all the years? He's been a medical doctor for a long time. And or Dave, I mean, I have many questions. I just don't want to monopolize.
He changed the way medicine was practiced in this country. He took the voodoo out of it and made it scientific. Now, that was one big thing that he did for medicine. And he didn't particularly like doctors. You know, he could comment, he said, when I saw a buzzard in the air, I looked to see where the doctors were on the ground.
Yeah.
And, no, he would take, if the doctors gave him something, he would take it. But it almost killed him several times when he was taking the materials when he came back from
Talking about the warm springs?
Yeah, hot springs.
Hot springs, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he was a medical empiric in the sense that he really railed against theoretical approaches to medicine, that this should work because if you work it out on paper, it makes sense. And he hated that. He hated med-empiricism. He wanted to know something work because it's been tried and it worked in the past, right?
That's right. That's what he told his students. Said if you try it and it doesn't work, throw it out. Don't ever use it again. So, but he was so good in that he recognized what medicine should be, and you know how he designed the lawn. There was something he saw in France, and it was so that you could isolate people if they had bad diseases.
Yeah.
The lawn, you know, how it's laid out and everything was just right like the hospitals that France built to stop the epidemics and so forth. So
well, early on in medicine, didn't they just throw all sorts of people with all sorts of diseases in one room?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. 6 people in one bed with 6 different bad diseases.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Anyway.
You're right. He wasn't a pioneer of medical advances, but he was a champion of empirical medical approaches that really helped advance our understanding of the medicine of the day. Go back to, we still got, I want to get some of your views on what happened in the committee. Do you have any stories that are worth sharing with us about your experiences as a committee member that soured you on the Thomas Jefferson Memorial Foundation?
Well, like I said before, the committee was highly biased. There's 1 or 2 of us who were looking for the truth, and so that was good. But you know, they didn't. You know, they took my paper, and hid it. I mean, it did not get to anybody. So when I had to give it, I think I gave it to Dan Jerdman. He finally got to read it. But anyway, several people resigned after they had been on that committee, and I think because they were upset with the way it was run.
Okay.
The one woman that was really running it, she and the others had been saying for a couple of years that Jefferson followed the children of Sally.
Yeah.
And so how can you do that if she's the chairman and she was going to make the decisions? So that was one thing.
Well, she published a paper in Onuf's anthology, Sally Hemings and Thomas Jefferson, History, Memory, Civic Culture, in 1999. She authored a paper about concerning Jefferson's paternity prior to the study being finished. So,
yeah, sure.
And she's chairing the committee. How do you do that?
Yeah, well, they did it. They also let the part of the committee issue a paper to the thing in Williamsburg. The paper down there, they got the paper before the paper at Monticello was presented, and they used that as evidence of whatever they were looking for. And they shouldn't have been given that. They were given this by the leaders of the committee, and that was not right. They should have waited until the main paper was given. But I was proud of Dan Jerdman when he changed the reading there and said that the facts of this are not defined and not definable. In other words, they can't be reproduced.
The facts, in effect, poorly support the conclusions that they were drawing. The conclusions are massively overstated. Now, can you tell us about the formation, since have you been a lifelong member of the Thomas Jefferson Heritage Society? Could you tell us about Herbert Barger, about Richard Dixon, and about your role in that society, if you would, please?
Well, Barger was quite a character and a real good man. He took on the issue of finding the relatives of the Hemings and so forth, and was quite good at it. Our lawyer was also extremely, wrote a very nice article in our book on the Green Book. And
right here.
He was really good.
Oops.
So.
Yeah, you don't know this, Dr. Ken, but before Herbert Barger died, he shared with me probably about 25 rather intimate emails concerning his correspondence with the author of the DNA study, his reaction to that, as well as all sorts of data. I shared them with John Works. And what I'll do when we get done here, I will share, if you'd like, I'd share those emails with you and with Dave and Donna. Yes, these are very.
He took me in tow, and so he helped me think about where these people were and who they were and why they might think they're related to Jefferson. And he just was extremely good, very honest, and I really liked being around him.
Did he found the Heritage Society, or was that Richard Dixon?
It was a combination. Let's see. Trying to think. Well, he didn't actually found it. Several of us sort of put it together, and and brought it to fruition, and it's still sort of going. But thanks primarily to John, because he's, good gracious, what a job he's doing.
You're talking about John Works, and John Works is a descendant of Thomas Jefferson. Yeah.
You know, he's done what before the committee even met. That was for all the members of the Monticello, that owned the cemetery.
Yeah.
And he wrote it for them, and it was an extensive thing, and he sent it out to each one of them so they would be able to, at the annual meeting, vote not to let the Hemmings come in as members of the Monticello
Family. Right. The graveyard was at stake, right? A lot of these members wanted to be presumed people who were offspring of Thomas Jefferson, Sally Hemings. I say presumed because I certainly don't think that relationship ever happened. I've argued rather aggressively against that. So you have, it's part of the problem with, you say, who's harmed, right? Well, you're telling a lot of people who may not be, probably are not related to Thomas Jefferson, that they are related. They want to get buried into the Jefferson graveyard, which is a very privileged thing, right? And do you have, I mean, does anybody really have a right to do that to people unless you're absolutely certain of what you're talking?
They have to meet the vote of the members. During World War II, I was a military bugler, and I used to bugle up there taps for the people of the Jefferson descendants who had died in the service. I was the one who went up and played taps. So I had all sorts of contacts with them.
Well, Dr. Ken, we're running out of time. We've got just under 2 minutes. I want to thank you, and I'll let the other people thank you for spending your time. I'll let Donna speak right now. She's going to take us home. She will formally thank you a little bit better than I can, and she'll take us home and talk about the next episode.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wallenborn. And you really, I think, validated some of the thoughts I had already, and then hearing from you just solidified those thoughts. And I appreciate your time coming on to talk to us today. Thank you. And Dave, do you have anything?
Sorry, I couldn't fiddle with the computer.
You did just fine, Dr. Ken. I'm gonna formally thank you and end the phone conversation. We can talk later. And Donna's going to take us home. Thank you, Dr. Ken. We'll talk to you another time.
Oh, okay. In the next episode, we examine the work of the celebrated scholar Annette Gordon Reed, whose work, as Dr. Ken noted, has been the blueprint for the conclusions of the 2000 Thomas Jefferson Memorial Foundation report. Perhaps Dr. Holacek might have something to say about Gordon Reed's resignation from the Thomas Jefferson Foundation's board this Monday.
Yeah, that's something about which we didn't talk. Dr. Ken in this book has an essay, if I can get it up, I don't know how to do this here, Jefferson Hemings myth. He talked about that the narrative that they framed in the committee was right from Gordon Reed's 1997 book. So we'll talk about that next time. And Dave may or may not be with us. He's got a lot of other